Hey, it's me, James, and in this video, I'm going to be offering maybe a more intuitive way of working with playing cards. So stay tuned. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining me for this latest installment of my ongoing series where I talk about my personal study and practice of cartomancy using playing cards. If this is your first time here, I'd like to say welcome, and if you're a returning visitor and viewer, I'd like to say welcome back. So I'm very excited about this particular episode because I'm proposing something to consider in terms of an experiment with the playing cards. And I'm saying that because I'm experimenting with the cards in this way as well. So this episode really was inspired by a few comments that I got over the course of time doing this series, and one of those comments has been about memorizing the cards and how much rote memory goes into working with the playing cards. And so, now I will not kid you, going with the particular system that I work with, there is some level of memorization that's required, right? But that's not necessarily the only way that you could work with the cards. So I was giving this some thought when the last or most recent comment about memorization came in. And I was thinking, like, what other ways could we work with the cards that maybe could reduce the amount of memorization needed or required when working with maybe a more established system of cartomancy, right? So I was giving that some thought, and it reminded me of what it's like to work with Tarot de Marseille. And so if you're not familiar, Tarot de Marseille is a form of tarot, one of the main three out of the three systems, one of the main three to work with. And it is considered more pip style, and pip means that it's not fully scenic like the Rider-Waite-Smith system that is so commonly known and used in tarot communities, right? So this one is more pip style, but it's also historic. It was the way that tarot was used and read prior to Rider-Waite-Smith coming onto the scene, and then after that, the Crowley-Toff deck, right? So I was thinking about that in terms of using Tarot de Marseille methods or styles working with playing cards. And so one of the main ways of working with Tarot de Marseille, if you are familiar, is that we are encouraged as TDM readers to look at the image, even though it may look like a pip image, meaning, like, for instance, the Four of Batons, which is the Four of Wands, would have four wands, but they are strategically, I will say strategically, or decoratively arranged with maybe some floral arrangements or some other things that are going on in the image besides the four batons, right? So you're encouraged to take a look at the whole image to see what might come to mind. I thought, like, what if we approach the playing cards in a similar way? So I figured, since this is an experiment on my part, meaning something new that I'm working with or trying to maybe bring more into my practice, I thought I would get a new deck. So the deck that's going to be assisting me for this video is one I recently got, I mean literally just got at my local Barnes & Noble, and that is the Bicycle Cinder playing cards. So I figured, since I was going to be working with something new in terms of my own personal study and practice. And let me throw this in there just as an aside. So this is what we call the art of your study and practice, right? You are always wanting to experiment. You're always wanting to try something new, right? You're always wanting to build on or evolve your practice, right? So it's never going to be a static thing where you don't try anything new or you don't bring new elements in, right? So just keep that in mind. If you are also establishing your own personal study and practice, right? So again, those are the cards. So I had them laid out by suits, and so I thought I would just run through maybe one suit to kind of give you an idea of where my mind is going with this, maybe to give you some food for thought as to how you might see things when you look at the cards for yourself. Now, this is all about two things: pattern recognition. What do you see in the pattern, and what do you associate with that pattern recognition? Okay, so I figured the easiest suit to start off with would be the suit of hearts, right? So first off, give some thought to what do you associate hearts with, right? So for me, I think about love and romance, right? The heart. I think about feelings and emotions. So things like that. So going with that as maybe just a general, loose, broad topic or theme for the suit of hearts, I'm going to hold up each card that, brings something to mind. So I'm looking here and I see that the heart is quite large on this card. So it may make me think of, someone who's big-hearted, right? Or somebody who has a big heart. So then you stop and think, okay, if that's the association, what does that mean when somebody has a big heart or is big-hearted? Well, you think that maybe they're generous, they're giving, they're caring, they're nurturing to a big degree or to a great degree, right? Because of the size of the heart. Now, of course, if you go with the idea that this could mean love and romance, this might mean the ace is the beginning or the initial start of a romance, a relationship, something of that nature, right? And then the other thing, because the ace is number one and there's only one heart on the card, it could mean somebody who's feeling alone or, is single, that kind of thing. So those are just some ideas of what you could do when you're looking at the image on the card, right? Because there is an image. Now I'm looking here and there's some interesting design as a backdrop to the card, right? So I'm going to hold it real close and hopefully you can see that. But somewhere in this background, it's like a shade of gray. There's a little bit of a crown here, right? I see a crown in there. So when I think of a crown, I think maybe like a crowning achievement, and what does that mean? That means like you've established something that, has brought you a great deal of maybe reward or recognition, right? This may be somebody who's feeling like, suit of hearts, feelings and emotions, that they're ready to take on maybe a more leadership role or more of a position of authority, right? Crown could suggest king, queen, and ruler, authority, right? The other thing is making me feel like somebody could be feeling, going with the suit, that they're sovereign, right? They're feeling their sovereignty, which means their sense of independence, right? Meaning that, so there could be like maybe the challenge for somebody in a feeling, relationship, emotional context is that they're really, really prideful or proud of their sense of independence, right? There's nobody who's going to rule over them or control them, right? Like they are their own best authority when it comes to their relationship with themselves, right? So those are just some examples of what you could do with the imagery on the card. So let's move on. So now here we have a pattern with the two of hearts, right? So what do I see, right? Because it's best if I just talk about it from my perspective and not try to impose something on you, because I want you to be thinking about what do you see. So what I see is, I see two hearts first off, right? That would make sense. But if you notice, they're on opposite ends of the card, right? With this great sense of distance between them, right? So, and one is pointing up, one's pointing down. So the first thing I think of is that people who feel like they're on opposite ends of the spectrum or opposite sides of an issue, right? Right, with this space in between, that's, this could be the issue. And we're feeling like we each feel something different. If it's a two-party thing, right? We each feel something differently about the issue at hand, right? Or it could just be feeling a sense of distance from another person, right? These could just be removed from one heart, this idea about being alone, to now two. So this could be a couple, this could be a pair, all those things that we think about with two, right? But again, with the idea that they're on opposite ends, could just be about there's this space, there's this distance between two people, right? They feel a sense of maybe disconnect or, not feeling a sense of closeness or intimacy, right? Again, now you might say, well, that's not what the card means, but we're not talking about memorized meanings. We're talking about looking at the card and seeing what do I see in the pattern in the image, right? Now the other thing, because I sometimes hear music in my head when I'm looking at cards, I'm hearing the Paula Abdul song Opposites Attract, right? So those are just some examples with the number two, right? And what you see in the image. Okay, so let's move on to three. So now here we have the same pattern with the two of hearts, but now we have an additional heart put in the middle, right? So this could be, I'm thinking like, first thing I notice is that they're in a straight line, right? So immediately what comes to my mind is, alignment, right? So feeling a sense of alignment, right? Or it could just be a matter of there's another heart in between two hearts. So this could be a third party, and one of the traditional meanings of the three of hearts is, it could represent a love triangle in a certain context, right? And when I talk about context, that means questions, right? The question or the situation always dictates what meaning you're going to use for the card, right? But I'm looking at this and I'm seeing alignment, or that there's something going on between two parties, right? So now it could also be like, if we take what I said about the two, we notice this space has been filled, right? So now we have maybe an emotional issue, that there's some sense of like feeling different ways about it. Like, one person feels one way about the issue, another person feels another way about the issue, right? But this is the central issue, and then we have the two people at opposite ends of the issue, right? See, notice, and sometimes it might help to talk about what you're seeing out loud so you can hear yourself, right? And so it may trigger some more ideas, right? But the first thing I think about, first thought that came to me with the pattern is alignment. So now I'm just going to take a look to see if there's anything else going on in the cards, right? Okay, so now here, maybe for them, aside from the aces, there's something going on in the corner here and there, right? So it could just be, if I look at that, maybe somebody who's feeling cornered about a particular issue, right? And so what does that mean, this expression, feeling cornered? Well, I feel like I'm trapped, I'm feeling I'm stuck, I'm feeling a sense of limitation or restriction, right? I've gotten myself into a corner, right? And so now I got to think about, how do I get out of that corner, right? And feeling cornered could be like, I'm being hard pressed to maybe express how I feel about a particular issue, and maybe I'm not ready, right? Again, that's all just from looking at the pattern on the card, right? Okay, so now let's try 4. So now, here's the 4 of hearts. And the first thing that I notice is that I see a square, right? So to me, it looks like a square, right? So for me, this might be the sense of like feeling, remember that's what the suit is, feeling like a square. Well, what does that mean? That could mean like I feel like I'm the odd person out. I feel like nobody gets me, nobody understands me. I feel that way, right? I feel like I just don't fit in, right? So all those things about maybe the 4. Now, it could also be too the square, right? So it could just be equality, right? Or some level of equality, right? Because I imagine that the 4 sides being equal, right? So there may be something about feeling equal, or a sense of wanting to feel a sense of equality within a relationship, like we are equals, we are equals, right? I'm not superior to you, you're not superior to me, inferior, that kind of thing. It's equality, right? Now, I think of the number 4, right? So now this might be thinking about, what are your associations for the 4? I think about the formation of a relationship, right? And so then this could be like a building block, yeah? So we've laid the foundation and we're building on that, right? And I'm still sticking with the idea that the pattern looks like a block, right? That's a square or a rectangle, a rectangular image, right? And so feeling like I'm able to build on that, right? So that is the 4. With the 5, okay, this is what I immediately see with the 5. So I'm going to hold the 5 of hearts up, right? So now we could go with the idea that I see a square, right, with a heart in the middle, right? So this could be feeling like emotions are blocked, right, within the square, right? Or feeling a sense of limitation and restriction, like I'm not able to express my feelings in a given situation, right? That sense of limitation and restriction, feeling stuck or blocked, right? The other pattern that I see here, I see an X, right? If you connect the hearts, they form an X, right? So what does an X mean? It could mean an X like an ex-romantic partner, right? So somebody's ex may be coming back on the scene, or it could be feeling the need to cancel something out, eliminate something, right? X is the idea of cancellation, negation, elimination, right? So that's what I'm seeing with just going with the idea of what is in the pattern, right? So there's 2 ways of looking at that. It could be a square or an X, right? Okay, number 6. Now here's an interesting one. So now here we can talk about equality, because the first thing that I see is I see 2 lines. It makes me think of the 3 of hearts, right? Where we talked about alignment, so things lining up. So now we have pillars, or we have a sense of balance, right? Because there's two of them forming the same shape on either side, right? The other thing could be like this forms a path, right? If I turn the card this way, then I see a path, right? So this could be, the path to love and romance, right? But there's nothing on the path, right? Or we're working on, achieving a greater sense of balance within a relationship, right? So those are two ways you could look at the 6. So now let's take a look at the 7. So now what we can do here is, if I just go with what I just said about the 6 of being a path, right? So now we have the two sides of the road or the path, right? Then we have the heart in the middle. So this could be traveling on the path or on the road to love and romance, right? Or, this is just what's coming to me, letting your feelings lead the way, yeah? And this is what I'm talking about. Like, I just went with what I saw and just had that intuitive impression come to mind, right? So then the other thing, if we talk about pattern recognition, I see two shapes here. The top 3 hearts form a triangle, and then the bottom 4 form a square, right? So I know in metaphysical or more esoteric circles, that might mean something, right? For me, like the triangle pointing down would be some emphasis on the physical or the material. And then the square is a symbol for the earth, right, as an element, right? So there's a focus here on, taking your feelings and making them grounded or practical, There's an emphasis on maybe the physical, right? So this could be more about the physicality in a relationship or feeling a connection to your body, right? The other pattern that I'm seeing as I'm holding the card up, the top 5 hearts could form the X that we saw with the 5 of hearts, yeah? And then we have maybe a line down here with the 2 remaining hearts, right? So what is that? What could that mean? It could just mean that it's underscoring, right, the line, something about an X or canceling something out or eliminating something, feeling this need to just say, I'm over that, I'm done with that kind of thing, and a sense of moving on, right? Again, maybe not what the cards mean in terms of established cartomancy systems, but this is a way to kind of work through the idea of, I have a challenge with memorization, right? But you still have to do some work here, right? You still have to, it's not just about what do you see in the pattern, is what does a pattern mean to you in your worldview, your life experience, your frames of reference, right? You still have to be willing to do some level of work in terms of creating meanings for the cards, right? I'm just offering maybe more moving away from the logical, rational, analytical, and more into the intuitive or maybe even creative, right? Here's what I know about cards and card meanings, right? Even with established systems, right? We make meanings for the cards, right? So the first system that was established, or the first set of meanings that was established, somebody did what I'm doing right now. They just looked at the cards, came up with a system, shared the system with other people, and the collective resonated with it enough to some degree for it to become established, right? That's all it is, right? Okay, moving on to the 8 of hearts. So now here, what I notice is that we have a couple of patterns, but the first one that jumps out at me is we have the path, right, from the 6 and the 7, the path, but now instead of 1 heart like on the 7, there's 2, right? So this could be 2 hearts on the road or the path to love, right? Right, and if you notice, pattern recognition, the hearts are much closer than they were in the 2 of hearts, yeah? So we're working on the path of love and romance, we're now becoming closer, right? And it says too, maybe on the path to road, on the path to love, excuse me, just remember that you are not always going to feel the same way as the other person in the relationship feels. And that just may be okay, right? Right? Okay. So that's what I see. So I see like 2 hearts on the path to love and romance. That's the first thing that jumps out at me. Second thing is that I notice now the top 3 hearts form the triangle. So now we have that inverted triangle again. For me, that represents maybe a focus on the material, or it's a pointer saying, look to the pattern down here, right? That just came to me in the moment too. And then what do we have? We have the 5. That could be the X again, right? Or we have the square with the heart in it, right? That sense of feeling, blocked, right? And it's emphasizing, by pointing down to it, it's emphasizing that sense of limitation, restriction, that kind of thing. Now, you could also invert it and turn it up, right? And then you have the 3 hearts forming a triangle at the bottom, and then you have the other pattern at the top. But I tend to like, and this is just me, I tend to like reading it this way, right? So you can decide what orientation when you're working with the cards best fits you, right? So that is maybe some ideas with the 8 of hearts, right? Taking a look at the patterns and what do you see in the patterns, right? So it may be just pointing out, the top 3 hearts, that there is something having to do with, blocked emotions, a limitation or restriction around expressing how you feel, that kind of thing, right? Or it could even be there needs to be a commitment, right? I think of the number 3, and especially as the shape of a triangle, and I think about commitment. There may be a commitment is needed to be willing to move out of the sense of restriction when it comes to expressing how you feel. Right, so that is the 8, the 9. Here we have again, we have that path, and we have the 1 heart. Right, so it could just be, I wanted to pull the 7, right? So we have the 7, and it's a similar pattern, right? Only there's just 2 more hearts added to it. Right, but there's a sense of like there's more there's more to this image here than here. So there's a sense of like the hearts are closer, right? But the image is basically the same. Right? So it may be a matter of like what's the difference between the 7 and 9 that you might want to look at and come up with in terms of a meaning, right? Now another thing you could work with the numbers, right? So what you could do here is like if you were doing a multiple card reading and you pulled the 7 as the first card and then the 9, you might think, okay, so now feelings are getting more intense, right? Because we moved from a 7 to a 9. Right? Again, this is without having to memorize what the 7 means in numerology. I mean, you could do that, but that would require some form of memorization, remember? And so now we're just taking a look at just the numbers themselves, right? We just notice there's an increase, right? So there's maybe more intense feelings, right? That kind of thing, right? Because we notice the increase. Now, if it was the other way around, we had the 9 and then we went down to the 7, could be a decrease in feelings, right? I'm not feeling as intense about whatever the situation is than I was in the past, right? Again, and that's all it's do is you're just taking a look at the numbers and noticing increase or decrease, right? Okay, so that's the 9. And then we have the 10. And the 10 is similar to the 8 again. The only thing different here is that there's 2 more hearts on the card than with the 8. So it could be the same thing. It could be feeling, a sense of completion if you go with the 10 being maybe at the end of the spot cards, right? Not about what the 10 means, just noticing that it's at the end of the spectrum, right? So we moved from the ace, which is the 1, right, the beginning, to the 10, which is just could be the completion, the end of the cycle. So this could just be the ending of a situation and feeling a sense of fulfillment, right? There's a lot of feelings there, right? So feeling a sense of fulfillment with that, right? So I'm looking to see what else. So the other thing that I noticed as I'm looking at the card and turned it over, so now we have a mirror, right? So this card could be about mirroring, right? Because we have a pattern being mirrored. The same pattern that's at the top with the 5 hearts is also at the bottom. Yeah? So something is compounded, right? 2, right? So it's either compounded or there's a sense of something being reflected, mirrored back to see. Right? So that is the 10. So now let's take a look at the court cards. And part of me wanted this because the court cards aren't the standard bicycle court cards. So this just might be a little fun to play with. So here we have the Jack of Hearts. So now I'm looking at the image, right? Now remember, this is fresh out the box. So I'm looking at the image, and the first thing that I notice is that he has a leaf in his hand. So for me, that represents the idea of like turning over a new leaf, which is, it's interesting that it's in his hand, right? So this is an action, but it's a metaphorical action, like feeling the need to turn over a new leaf. So what does a turn over a new leaf mean, right? For me, it means like I'm going to approach things in a different way, or have a different way of seeing something, understanding something, perceiving something. My perception about a situation has changed, right? Or I'm willing to adopt a new attitude because I'm hearing Patti LaBelle singing, I've got a new attitude, right? So that's what you do. You just kind of just roll with it, right? And then I'm noticing that he has an axe in the back, but the blade is pointing to the right here. So it would be interesting if I had another card here, I might say, okay, what is that cutting into? And that's a Lenormand technique, right? And here's the other thing. You could use different techniques from different systems if they work for you. It's just a matter of play, right? We call these playing cards for a reason, right? You play with them, right? So you're just playing this out and just seeing what you see, right? You don't have to commit to it. It doesn't have to become law for you, right? You're just experimenting, right? So I might think about in the future, if I'm working with this deck and I notice a card coming after it, it might be cutting into that card. And what would that mean, right? Right? It could mean, as I'm talking about it out loud, since it's facing behind him, it could be about cutting out something from the past, right? Removing myself from the past, a past situation that I feel like maybe is holding me back or keeping me from moving forward, right? That would be his focus this way. Right? So that is the Jack. Now let's take a look at the Queen. Okay, so I'm looking here at the Queen. So let me hold it up for you. Right? So here's the Queen of Hearts. Right? And the first thing that I notice is that she's holding flowers. Right? So that could be about blooming, blossoming, something unfolding. Right? Maybe giving flowers, or she's either giving them or receiving them, right? We don't know, right? We can just play with that. Giving or receiving flowers. So now what does that mean when somebody either gives a gift of flowers or receives flowers, right? It signifies on some level there's caring there. There's a message that's wanting to be stated with the expression of flowers. Right? So let me take a look at the image. What else do I see? Ooh, I'm noticing around her neck is a heart necklace, right? So that could be, the necklace covers the neck or the throat chakra, right? So this is all about communication, speaking loving words, loving, caring, nurturing words, right? So that is the Queen of Hearts and what I'm seeing in the moment. I'm just looking. Yeah, so that's what I'm seeing in the moment with the Queen of Hearts. Now, King of Hearts. So now in the traditional bicycle decks, the King of Hearts is known as the Suicide King because he's got the sword that looks like it's running through his head. This one doesn't, so we get to play with this a little bit, right? So I'm looking at it, and I'll hold it up. So here we have the King of Hearts, and the first thing that I notice immediately right off the bat is that his scepter has a heart at the end of it, right? So if we go with the idea that a king implies somebody who's a ruler, right? A leader, right? This could be somebody who may be in a position of authority, who's a leader, who goes with his heart. He rules with his heart, meaning like he leads with his feelings, right? So going back to what I said earlier about one of the cards about letting your feelings lead the way. Yeah, so he's a leader, but he's an emotional leader. He leads with his feelings, right? Or he could just be more intuitive, right? He feels things, right? Our intuition works with our feeling nature, right? So it could just be like he's really in tune or in touch with his, emotions, his feelings, or his intuition, right? And that's what he lets lead the way, right? But he is a person who maybe takes other people's feelings into account, right? And that's the first thing that I noticed, with the King of Hearts. So that's exactly my point. So now let's take a look maybe through some of the other suits really quickly, right? Because you all know, like if you hang out with me in these videos, I can be a little long-winded, right? And my videos can be a little on the long side. So um, the pattern recognition could be the same. So now with clubs, because this is the next suit of cards I'm holding up here, so then you just take whatever it is that you associate with the suit of clubs and just do the same thing, right? So here we might have, with the 2, we might have, you know, a working relationship, because for me the suit of clubs represents work. But if you just go with the idea of like we're not trying to memorize things, suit of clubs. When you think of clubs, the word clubs, what comes to mind, right? For me, I think of like people going to clubs. And what's the idea of a club? A club is a place where people who are either of like mind or have a similar interest or hobby get together and have activities around that common interest or bond. Yeah. So that could be, so now this could be two people who have a mutual interest, right? They may express it differently. Again, this idea about being at the opposite ends of the spectrum. Or this could be a working relationship in which there is a little bit of, we're not so close, you know? What's coming to me, the expression is, it's not that deep, right? We just are two people who work together, right? It could also be a disagreement about something having to do with work, right? Again, that sense of space and that each pip is pointing one way up, one way down, right? Let's take another one. Okay, so, you know, the patterns are pretty much all the same. So you would just keep maybe some of the associations that you have for the suit more in mind. But now let's take a look at the court cards really quickly. Okay, so I'm holding up the Jack of Clubs, right? And honestly, I don't see too much here. I might focus more on the idea that his implement here, the thing that he's holding, might mean something. Right? But I'd have to sit with this one honestly. Oh, okay. I'm glad I looked at it again. Okay, so now what does come to me is that on his cap, he has a feather, right? So there's that expression, having a feather in your cap. What does that mean? That means I've accomplished something, right? That sense of, again, reward, recognition, achievement, right? Feather in my cap. And that may be work-related, right? Or gaining some notoriety in a social setting or a social environment, that kind of thing. Here we have the Queen of Clubs. I'm looking, and so the first thing that I notice is that, again, much like the Queen of Hearts, she's holding a flower, but it's a single flower, whereas the Queen of Hearts had multiple flowers in her hand, right? This is just one, right? So what might that signify? A single flower versus an arrangement of flowers, right? And so I'm seeing, what else do I see in the image? You know, I'm just noticing the difference in costuming here, right? So you notice that she's got this big collar behind her head, you know, and her crown is not as large, right? So that might mean something, right? Nothing's coming to me in the moment, and that's okay. Nothing has to come to you immediately. You just go with the immediate thing that you see, and then you kind of just riff on that, right? Okay. The King of Clubs. Let me look. Okay. So the only thing that I'm noticing immediately with the King of Clubs, let me hold it up, is that he's holding a sword. So again, that might be like when you think of a sword, so this could be, you know, maybe somebody who is by profession, right? Clubs being about work. By profession, maybe he's a surgeon, right? Somebody who cuts things, right? Or maybe an editor, again, somebody who cuts things professionally speaking. Think about all the professions that require some level of cutting, and then you might have some meanings for this guy here, right? Now this could be somebody who's razor sharp, right? The sharp end of a sword, right? Or somebody who has a very sharp wit, razor sharp, you know, meaning like they're on it. They don't miss a beat when it comes to expressing something. Maybe with a sense of sarcasm too, who knows, right? So those are some things that we could do with the quartz from the suit of clubs. All right, let's take a quick look with the diamonds. I'm just kind of going through this idea here. You know, the patterns for the numbered cards are going to be the same, so you could play with those. But think about, what does a suit of diamonds mean to me? When I think of a diamond, what immediately comes to mind? Well, I think of jewelry, right? I think of, because diamonds are usually set into jewelry. But I also think about diamond mines, and they represent the earth. So I would think of maybe the more earth element. So this could be about as a suit association, it could be about physical matters, material matters, concerns, that kind of thing. Okay, so now I'm looking at the courts because I just want to, all the court cards are different, so let's just see what we see, right? So here I'm noticing with the Jack of Diamonds, right? Whereas the first thing that I notice is the difference between him and the Jack of Clubs is that he has his tool or his implement resting across his body, like almost over his shoulder, whereas the Jack of Clubs had it in front of him. So that might be a form of defense, right? Protection, where this is I'm more at ease, but I still have some level of responsibility because it's coming across the shoulder. So that for me represents some level of responsibility, but I may be more relaxed about it than maybe the Jack of Clubs, right? So there's that. Let's see, the Queen of Diamonds. Okay, so I'm not sure what this is, but the thing that I immediately see is, and I'll hold it up really close, I'm noticing that it looks like she's holding something. Now, I'm not sure if that's a book. I'm not sure if that's a fan that's, closed. Right? So if I just go with the idea that it looks to me like a fan that's closed, it could be this is a person who is a fan of somebody else's work. And that meaning like a fan, like I have a sense of appreciation for that work, right? I'm just looking to see what else I see. Now, I also noticed that she's also holding a flower, so that might be a thing for all the queens in this deck. But here we have the flowers kind of drooping. What does that mean? That might mean, I might need to tend to something that's kind of withering, or maybe something that is lacking energy, right? And kind of bringing that back to health, right? So that's might be what I would see. Since she's holding it, means like I need to take action to kind of change that, improve that, fix that, right? Then we have the King of Diamonds. So the only thing that comes to me immediately with the King of Diamonds, I'll hold it up, is that he very clearly is looking to the left, right? So that would be the left for me, right? So any card here giving some emphasis to that, because that would be a clear directional cue, right? So I'm not seeing much more in the imagery than that. And again, that is okay, right? Now I take that back. So I'm looking and I'm noticing that he is holding his scepter, which seems shorter in comparison to the other two kings, right? But he's holding it with both his hands, right? So that may be really about holding on to something tightly, right? I'm doing it with both hands, right? Not single-handedly, both hands, right? Meaning like I'm really invested in taking action on this or holding on to this. Now remember, if diamonds are about the material, right? So material possessions or resources, then I'm really holding on to what I've got for whatever reason, right? Okay, so last suit, the suit of spades. So I'm just, again, going really quickly here. Now, I will hold the Ace of Spades up, right? So, because traditionally in most bicycle decks, the Ace of Spades is the most prominent card in terms of all the aces, right? Because it's usually, the pip is usually very large. But this one also has, the copy for the bicycle playing card company, right? But it also has the word cinder on there, right? So if I might look at that, I might think of like, okay, what does the word cinder mean to me, right? So I might think about something that's burning, something that's smoldering, that kind of thing, right? And here's what I'm noticing within the pip itself, right? So I'm going to hold it up real closely, as close as I can. So I don't know if you can see that, but I see here, it looks like a butterfly, yeah? With a crown on it, right? So there may be something about, what do butterflies symbolize? Or you think of with butterflies. I think of this idea about transformation, right? Because the caterpillar becomes a butterfly. So there's this sense of transformation that's taken place. And with the crown above it, again, that's that sense of sovereignty or a crowning achievement, like a huge change or shift is taking place, a huge transformation, and it's being acknowledged, right? So for me, the suit of spades can represent the mind, but it's also the suit of problems, troubles, challenges, obstacles, yeah? But it, for me, can also represent the mind. So this could just be saying, too, like a huge transformative effect has taken place in our thinking, right? And it's going to manifest something in our external world, right? Because I go with the idea about changing your mind, change your life, right? So that is with the pip. Now, it could also be something's being addressed because something's been smoldering, lingering, right? So, the idea about when there's smoke, there's fire, right? So we're letting something smolder. And so there could be like, okay, perhaps we need to address that, right? Right. And so as I'm saying that, to keep yourself from burning up, yeah? And that could just be metaphorical for getting yourself really angry, right? So now if we go with the idea here, we have maybe two people who are in opposition, going with the idea that swords, that's tarot in me. Spades can represent, opposition, conflict, challenge, right? So here we have clearly maybe this idea of challenge, like two people with opposing views or perspectives or ideas, right? And it's creating distance, right? Okay. This idea, I'm holding up the 4, this idea about thinking that I'm stuck, right? In a square. Thinking I'm stuck, I'm limited, I'm restricted, right? I'm doing it to myself because it's in my mind. Right, now this definitely is about cutting, right? With the X being formed here, it's about elimination. Now I will say for me, one of the meanings, and this is just born out of experience, this could be about be mindful of holding sharp objects because you could get cut. The last time I pulled this card, what happened in my life outside of pulling the card, when I came back to look at the card, I was at work and somebody distracted me long enough for me because I had a box cover in my hand at the time and I poked myself with it. And the first thing that I thought of was like, this is the 5 of spades. It's the first thing that came to my mind. I'm okay now, mind you, because it was just a little nick. But, so I've learned when I pull this card, I have to be really mindful about how I handle sharp objects, right? But you still can maybe come away with the same impression just going with the X on the card, right? And that understanding that spades, I keep wanting to say swords, spades have sharp points, right? Okay. I'm just going through the others, just seeing what I see. Okay, so now let's look at the courts and kind of wrap this up. So here we have with the Jack of Spades, first thing I noticed right off the bat is that he is holding a horn or a trumpet, right? So this could be about putting something on blast, right? If we go with the idea that jacks can represent news or messages, right? Or getting on the horn, right? That's an old expression because I'm old enough to remember about using the telephone, right? So we're going to get on the horn, right? Or this could be about tooting your own horn, right? And then the most obvious one, this could be about music, right? Somebody who has a gift or a talent for music, right? And then you keep in mind what type of instrument, right? You have to blow in this, right? So that would make it an air instrument, or I think it's a wind instrument. I'm not, instruments are not my forte, but I think this would be considered a wind instrument because you have to blow into it. Right. So those are some aspects with the Jack of Spades. Immediately, that's coming to me. So now I notice with the Queen of Spades, interesting. So the first thing that immediately comes to mind is that she has the spade pip on her scepter. So that could just be, again, ruling with the mind. Again, it's somebody who's really sharp. And that could be sharp meaning like sharp, I'm on it. Or somebody who's very sharp in terms of like has a cutting kind of quality or characteristic to her. Right, and then the other thing that I noticed in comparison to the other queen, she's also holding a flower, but hers is black. So what does that mean, right? Now here we have the King of Spades, and he's holding a very long sword, right? But his is wrapped up. There's some blue ribbon or wrapping around it, right? So this could be somebody who's wrapped up in the way he thinks. Right, he may lead with his intelligence. So this is going to be somebody who's very smart or has a great acumen. Maybe somebody who's very proud of what he has achieved, intellectually speaking. Right? So that's what I see with the King of Spades. Last one is the Joker. So now there are two Jokers, because this will be a follow-up to my last video on the Joker. So there's two Jokers in this deck. So now if I continue to work with this deck, I may remove the black and white one, right? And go with the colored one. So now what do I see when I look at the Joker? So the first thing I see is like he is looking this way. So that's a directional cue. So I might offer to look at this card to see what that might mean, right? He's in a jester costume. So what are my associations with being a jester, right? So that might be, you know, a sense of lightening up, you know, seeing the humor in the situation, being able to laugh at a situation, you know, that kind of thing. Or telling the truth through humor, right? And the only other thing that I notice is that the item that he's holding, most jesters in most of the decks that I have acquired over time, they're holding that particular item up, and he has his down. So what might that mean? Right? It could be about putting something down, letting something down. The thing that came to my mind was about the expression about letting your guard down, right? So it could be like, if I go with that as a possibility, this could be about not willing to hide behind humor or being funny, or the idea like you have to be either the life of the party or the clown, right? It makes me think of, like, you know, when we were in high school, you know, which for me was many moons ago, but the idea like everybody had like a title, you know, so this person was the jock and that person was the clown and this person was the brain, you know, that kind of thing. So this would be for this person who maybe has established an identity of being the clown and not taking anything seriously. And then the idea that he's got this lowered could be about lowering that, like, you know, being willing to not necessarily use that as a mask, possibly, you know, to hide behind, right? And as I'm looking at the card, it makes me think of Chandler Bing from Friends, yeah? That idea. Like, Chandler doesn't always have to be the one with the snappy remarks or the witty comebacks or, you know, what have you, right? So that is just an example of my experiment with maybe a more intuitive approach with working with playing cards. So let me know in the comments what you thought. Would this be something that you'd be willing to try? Or if you've tried it, circle back and let me know in the comments what you came up with some of the cards. I would love to hear about it. So this is James Himm Mitchell signing off. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next installment of my ongoing series where I share aspects of my study and practice of cartomancy with playing cards. Take care and have a great day.